All right, welcome everyone. We are very happy to have you here tonight. We are going to learn all about redistricting and gerrymandering. We are going to hear from three, at least two fantastic organizations, and then the one I lead, which is also fantastic. But it's hard to toot my own horn. So we're going to start tonight. I am going to put out this poll for you just to see who we have in the room here with us. So three very simple questions. Tell us what level of students you work with, what class you feel like you're most likely to use these resources with or sort of preparing for, and then how confident are you at this moment about teaching redistricting and gerrymandering? It's always hard to give an intro and call yourself a fantastic work. I mean, we're good, but that's what we got.
Y'all are awesome.
All right, give you 10 more seconds here on the poll, and then let's see what we have. All right, let's take a look. So folks, it looks like we have a whole lot of high school teachers. We do have some middle school teachers, and I'm guessing we'll have even a few more people who may not work directly with students. A lot of people looking at civics and government, some history, geography. And then we kind of have a nice little bell curve shape here for how confident we are, which is great. And regardless of where you fall on within that bell curve, hopefully you'll walk away tonight with some things that you can plug directly into your classroom and some fantastic resources here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get us started here, do a few intros, and we'll do our best to learn from each other this evening. All right, there we go. So we will be sharing not only the presentation that we have here, all of the resources that we're sharing this evening. We also will have the recording of this webinar as well. So if you have a colleague who didn't get a chance to join us here, all of that, we'll post it on the Retro Report website. I know the recording and stuff is also going to go on the New American History site. So with us here tonight, Annie, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Hi, I'm Annie Evans. I'm the Director of Education and Outreach for the New American History Project at the University of Richmond. And I'm very excited to be with my friends, David and Rebecca, tonight to talk about a topic that I think your students will find important and fascinating.
Wonderful. I'm going to drag this over to the correct side. So my name is David Olson. I'm the person who's been sending you quasi-relentless emails. I am the Director of Education at Retro Report. And I'll tell you more about Retro Report in a little bit, but not very long ago, I was in the position of most of you as a high school social studies teacher. I taught AP US government and politics, criminal justice, modern US history, a whole bunch of other things. So very excited to join you tonight and talk about some of the resources that Retro Report has. Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca Theobald. I am a research professor in the geography department at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and very delighted to be working with these folks and who have really great resources, and also to be with you because you are the people in the classroom making a difference for the students. So I am delighted to look at this from a geographic perspective.
And I know certainly for all three of us, we're very receptive. If you'd like to get a hold of us after the fact, whether through email, Twitter, if you have further questions or are looking for additional resources, you have three folks here who are very willing to help. So our goals for tonight, you're going to hear from all three of us. We're going to talk about some resources that our organizations have created or curated, put together for you. And then we're going to take a look at some different strategies. So one, and it looks like the vast majority of you here with us have some experience looking at redistricting, gerrymandering, reapportionment. We want to make sure that we've developed some strategies to make sure everybody, including the students in your classroom, understand the distinctions between some of these, how they build on each other. And then we'd love to go past the, hey, can I learn the correct terms, to how can I apply it? And then how can I go create and have your students be creating in the classroom. So we're going to talk about a number of digital tools. Rebecca's even going to talk about a physical tool that you can find within your state to put to use. I think we're gonna do our best to show that redistricting, gerrymandering are really things that are interdisciplinary, at least within the social studies realm, that this is not just a civics and government topic, but there are resources here to connect to history and geography, even economics, that can be used in a number of different places, no matter what else you might be teaching. And then we're going to talk about some open source tools. So I know Annie may go into a little bit more of, all of us create open educational resources, but we rely here on a number of open source tools to be able to do that. So we're going to talk about some of those tools that we would recommend. All right, Annie, you're up.
All righty. If you stop, okay, I'm going to share my screen. Just give us a second here, folks. Thank you, David. You did a great job bringing us right into what I want to jump into, which I'm just going to very briefly, if you have not heard about New American History yet, we are barely 2 years old. We launched shortly before the pandemic started, not knowing that very soon after we launched that everybody was going to need online digital tools pronto. And so in some ways, people have asked, were you guys mind readers? But I can assure you he's many things, but our director, Ed Ayers, who started New American History and who are all of the tools I'm going to share with you today, came out of his very vivid imagination and long love of teaching geography and history intertwined. So our key components of New American History include BUNK, which we're going to look at that tool today, which is a real-time curation of some of the best digital media available, including Retro Report. We have a wonderful collaboration with Retro Report, as well as several newspapers, magazines, podcasts, PBS shows, lots of different sources, and they all get put into BUNK. And then we are able to show through a behind the scenes, a very elaborate tagging system and algorithm, how many topics and time periods are interconnected. And so it's a different way for students to sort of choose their own adventure and explore history. So that's one of our main anchor tools. And the other one is American Panorama. American Panorama is our digital atlas. Most people are very familiar with the Mapping and Equality Project. Excuse me. Excuse me. But tonight we're going to focus on electing the House because it pertains to our topic. We're also going to show you how you can build your own collections within BUNK. All of the videos, all of the maps are ingested into BUNK. All of the backstory podcasts, if we have any backstory fans in the audience tonight, we've recreated the entire archive in shorter segments. And so those are now available to you. And then our last one is The Future of America's Past, which is a 25 to 27 minute per episode series that Dr. Ayers hosts on PBS, looking at stories that many of us perhaps did not learn about in our traditional history classes. So in a nutshell, those are our main key components, but we also pull in lots of different OER resources that fit in to create a learning resource library that is free for everyone here to use tonight. We were very excited. I was with the American Association of School Librarians last week at their conference, and they very kindly this past year presented us with one of the best digital tools of 2021, along with some of our other friends at Wakelet and Untold and a few other tools. So every year the librarians designate tools like New American History, and so we were delighted to be included in that very exciting list this year. So tonight, our main focus is going to be on gerrymandering and redistricting. So I'm going to focus primarily on two of our tools, which are American Panorama, specifically the Electing the House map, which is one of our interactive pieces of digital scholarship that was created by the Digital Scholars Lab at the University of Richmond, and how you can use other pieces of content, including the map, that are embedded into BUNK to bring this topic of gerrymandering and redistricting alive. Everything that you see on the previous slide and this one, and everything I'm going to share with you has been hyperlinked. I'm going to come out of presenter mode so you can see. Everything has been hyperlinked down below into your presenter notes. So don't worry about, asking for links. We've done that with all of our slides, I think, so that you'll have everything you need by the end of the evening. So I'm going to go ahead and start by sharing the map, because really the map is the main event. So electing the House includes every House of Representatives election from census data from 1840 up through 2018. The 2020 midterms are, the 2020 election data is in the process of being added. I really hope to be ready for tonight. However, because census data was late this year, and because there were so many lawsuits as recently as last month challenging election results, we weren't able to push that out yet, because we don't want to put something out and then have a court decision overturn something. But it will be updated soon. So electing the House, you have a couple of different ways that you and your students can interact with the map. You can have students look at it in this format as a cartogram or as a map. I think to get kids started, the map is probably the easiest way. However, we do want them, especially our AP Human Geo folks, to get familiar with using maps in different ways. You can also look at the winner or the strength of victory, which is very telling in these, especially in these past several election cycles, as the country gets more and more polarized, but also as elections are getting tighter and tighter in many of these races. So as you slide the slider tool through different decades, kids begin to see the map change, and they can drill down to their own individual districts. So I'm going to go to my own district here in Virginia. And you'll see if you double click on it, you can look at individual maps or individual districts. Kids, we go up here. Kids can look at over the years, what are the patterns? And so that's a great way to have a conversation about, when districts flip, and we do have those labeled on there. And also when we get into some third-party candidates. So they can also look at districts, how they have voted over time. They can look at different ways that the shape of the districts have changed as they toggle through these various different decades and election cycles. They also give you a little bit of insight over here on the left. I think a lot of kids tend to forget or skip over that part, but it kind of gives you insights as to why certain elections turned out the way they did. And so we find that this is a tool that's been very engaging. So we have two different versions of learning resources in our learning resources library that students can use. One of them is more geared towards middle school. And with all of our learning resources, we have added the immersive reader. I know we saw at least one person who works with EL students. And I'm imagining that everyone has EL or students with disabilities or students that maybe aren't reading on grade level in their classes. And so the immersive reader will actually read aloud the text that's on the screen for the learning resources. All of our learning resources come in two views. This is the teacher view. It says educators at the top. It's this beautiful cream color. And when you scroll down, what makes it a little different is it includes standards, vocabulary, this read for understanding piece, teacher tips, that sort of thing. And then it jumps right into the lesson. But the student view, if you go back up and view the student view, kids don't need to know the standards necessarily, and they you don't want to see, have them seeing the teacher tips. And so it's going to jump right into the content. But everything that you need for kids to work through this lesson is on the screen. It's already linked for you. You don't have to give them a different URL for the map. It's linked in here for you. It's all written in student-facing language so that they could work with a partner, they could work alone if they're homesick that day, working virtually, or if you have someone in quarantine, they can certainly go through the lesson on their own. And that way you can assign these, you can assign parts of it, you can use all of it, or you can just use the pieces that you have time for that fits into your curriculum and your pacing. So that is our very basic lesson that kind of walks kids through step by step on how to use the map. And there is a short segment on gerrymandering for younger students, but we do have a new lesson that we released that came about as a collaboration with David and Rebecca and the Educating for American Democracy Roadmap project that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And so with that project, we are taking a deeper dive for older students into gerrymandering and redistricting. And in addition to using some really great tools and resources of our own, including the map we just looked at, Retro Report, GeoCivics, we also have a short video from our friends at Untold, who also got the AASL award last year. So again, you've got your teacher view here, but everything that you're going to need is embedded in the map. But here we're going much deeper into going into bunk. Students can view the Retro Report video that David's going to talk. They can view it right here in our bunk or in the learning resource. Our viewer takes all the YouTube ads out, so you don't have to worry about them seeing something inappropriate or wasting time. But then with Bunk, they can also look at different connections. They can select their own connections using these tags. There's our friend, Mr. Jerry. And as they go through the cards, the tags will change. They can also pick different topics to explore through Bunk. And so that's just one way that they can engage with that material. They can create their own collection, or you can put together various pieces, including the Retro Report video and other content embedded into Bunk, and you can push that out as an assignment to students, or they can create their own. And that's basically in a nutshell what we have. I didn't know, David, do we want to take all the questions at the end or do questions per segment?
I think maybe let's hold questions to the end. Make sure we get our timing down, and then then we'll be.
And I think I used my time up. I hope I didn't go over.
I think you'll be okay.
That was very fast. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and throw it to you. All
right, thank you. So as I said at the top here, I'm David Olson. I am the Director of Education at Retro Report. I will forgive you just this once if you haven't heard of Retro Report before. We've been around for a number of years, 8-9 years now, making really outstanding short form documentary films. And it's fairly recently that we've begun our sort of headlong push into the world of education, really with the goal of creating materials that are freely available for teachers, and finding ways to interact with teachers so we can create films and lesson plans and webinars that meet your needs. So Retro Report does a really good job of telling narrative stories and finding ways to connect the past and the present. So it's a blend of investigative journalism, but also really powerful storytelling with really great characters. In all, our library of short films is over 250 large. They are all entirely free on our website. And we have a growing collection of lesson plans, student activities, and quite a bit more to come on the education side. And so what I'm going to show you here tonight is a snippet of film that we just re-released and updated. This was a film that originally was created a few years ago, but one of the things we pride ourselves on at Retro Report is having a living library of short films. And when I say short, the vast majority of the Retro Report films are in the 5 to 12 minute range. So they're really nicely designed for classroom use. They are not going to be I'm gonna push play and sit back and this is going to be my lesson for the day. They're really designed to be integrated into the lesson, to be a jumping off point for an inquiry lesson or a discussion or collaborative activities. Retro Report films are not going to take up your class period, but they will be great as part of a lesson that will push your kids to think a little deeper and ask some great questions. So this film, I'm going to show you about a 2-minute chunk of an 11-minute film here that was recently retitled Gerrymandering Tilts Political Power. And then I'll do a quick walkthrough of 2 brand new lesson plans with student activities that you can, hopefully plug right in and use in a handful of different types of classes. The way I chose to sort of divide it mirrors really, how I tried to step through it as a teacher, teaching modern U.S. history and then also AP government, of looking first at reapportionment and redistricting as one process, but then looking at the political application of those when it comes to gerrymandering, and what are some of the impacts, what are some of the rules and consequences for it. So we'll take a look at a short segment of this video. Again, it's available in its full form, 11 minutes long, for free on our website.
Gerrymandering doesn't just determine how many Democrats and Republicans will serve. It determines what kind of Democrats and Republicans. It contributes to polarization. It makes the more liberal Democrats more likely to win. It makes the more conservative Republicans more likely to win, and they are less likely to cooperate with each other, and that gets us to the politics we have now.
If you're a member of Congress representing that type of district, you don't hear different points of view. You hold a town hall meeting and all you ever hear is right on, keep doing what you're doing, and don't you dare compromise.
Gerrymandering has been around since the 1800s, but perhaps nowhere has it been more fraught than in North Carolina. One battle began more than 30 years ago when the Supreme Court ruled that the legislature had drawn voting districts in a way that disadvantaged black voters.
And in one unanimous decision today, the court said that North Carolina's redistricting plan violated the 1982 Voting Rights Act by reducing black voting power.
The court ruled that under the Voting Rights Act, minority groups should have the opportunity to elect their preferred candidates to Congress.
Need your help.
The remedy? New majority-minority districts, where minority residents of voting age made up more than 50% of the population.
In several states, new snake-like district lines were drawn, linking together small pockets of black voters.
I feel like things are changing in the right direction.
Just want to say hello to you. I'm running for Congress.
In the 1992 elections, the new majority-minority districts achieved their goal, and 17 new black representatives were elected to Congress.
The new Congress looks more like America than any other Congress in history.
And so what comes after this is an interview both from the time period and then today, contemporaneously, with Eva Clayton, who was one of those black members of Congress that was elected from one of those North Carolina districts. The thing I like best, one of the things I like best, I guess there's quite a few, about the work that Retro Report does, is the films that we put forward are not films that have easy answers. They tend to not be just explainer videos of here's the history, end of story. The rest of this 11-minute film really talks about some of the consequences of drawing majority-minority districts. That yes, it does result in larger numbers, greater numbers of minority candidates and legislators, but the result in places like North Carolina is that surrounding districts become whiter and more conservative, and it becomes easier for Republicans in North Carolina to win larger numbers of seats because they can draw those snake-like districts and sort of fence in all of the black voters within North Carolina. And so another portion of this film has an interview with a African-American woman who was a former state senator in North Carolina, who talks about how it really was her goal to get them to redraw the lines, which essentially eliminated her district and her job. But her quote there is, you don't understand. This is, I'm against racism. And basically the way that we've drawn those lines in North Carolina resulted in black voters having less representation because they smush us all into one spot. So here, it's a great jumping off point to discuss a whole bunch of different issues when it comes to how we draw lines in different states. So here, I'm gonna exit here. And so what you'll see, and this is our collection page for teaching about redistricting and gerrymandering. You'll find the full film here. And then if you go down below, you'll find our lesson plan and activity that focuses on reapportionment and redistricting. If you scroll a little lower, you'll find the lesson and activity for gerrymandering. And even lower, this is actually where we'll swap in the recording from this evening and have some resources. Then if you go down below, there are some additional resources, including some of the ones that that Annie just shared. So I'll give you a sneak peek here. So like I said, we tend to divide these into a lesson plan, which, you know, as Annie talked about for New American History and Bunk, is sort of the teacher-facing document. So here, you know, this will give you an overview, talk about where it could be used, lesson duration, some essential questions and objectives. And then at the very end here, we'll talk about what standards it connects to. And then the activity, this one, so as someone who very recently left the classroom, whenever I would go on the hunt for new resources, I almost never took a resource from some organization and used it exactly as they had created, right? Yes, I'm seeing nodding heads. Wonderful. You're with me, people, right? I took it and then I would go, okay, which chunks of this do I want to use? Which chunks make sense in my classroom? And I would find myself recreating Google Docs by splicing together a Frankenstein's monster worth of other people's lessons. So my goal in creating materials is to make it a little easier for you. So these are all in Google Docs. So when you come and check it out, make yourself a copy, swap out what you don't want, change the wording on questions that you're like, no, Dave doesn't know what he's talking about. I want to ask this. That's how I'd like you to use our resources. Take them as a wonderful starting off point. Hopefully the info in there is helpful to you. So this one, the reapportionment and redistricting. So again, if I were using this in a government class, I would want to connect it to the Constitution, right? Where do we find this in the census? We talk about this being a constitutionally mandated practice. And then I found this really cool interactive apportionment map, which draws directly from census data. So here, if I click on my state I currently reside in Wisconsin, if I take a look here, so I can toggle between all of these different, it's going to reload on me, all of these different decades. I can go here, click on Wisconsin, and when I click on it, it will actually show me year by year how the number of seats have changed. So if we want to talk about reapportionment with students, make this personal, have them connected to the state that they live. And then if you want to talk about representation and what that means and looks like, I love this little bar graph over here on the right. So in 1910, Wisconsin not only had 11 representatives in the House, but each of those representatives represented 212,078 human beings. Well, with the 2020 census, each of our 8 representatives will represent 737,000 human beings. So this is a great place to talk about what does that mean for representation? How does that change the job of a legislator, right? And then how might this look different between a member of the House and a member of the Senate? How are their roles different? All sorts of different things, okay? So going back to the lesson here, I then would ask students to actually go do some hands-on work, to do some drawing of districts in their state or a neighboring state themselves. So I put together 3 open source tools here: Districtor, District Builder, and Dave's Redistricting. You can read my little explanation of them. I think they all have some positives and negatives to them, but they're a great place to start. So here's a look at Dave's Redistricting. I was just looking the other day, saw someone posted on Twitter the plan for the state of Utah, which interestingly enough would take Salt Lake County, the most populous county, and divide it into 4. There are 4 districts in the state of Utah, and they are going to chop up Salt Lake City essentially and its suburbs into 4 different districts. So here, there's all sorts of different tools you can use to play with this. And this is where, after the fact, once you have these resources, go check them out. Go play to your heart's desire. I do, especially with some of these mapping resources, I recommend that you go play with them before you turn them over to students, because you're going to get questions. You're going to have people who go, what button do I push? So familiarize yourself with them first. I like Dave's redistricting, not because it's my namesake, but because I think it provides the easiest starting off point for students, because it starts with, here are the existing congressional maps that they can then go try to amend and adjust. And then we have the gerrymandering activity. Here I use what I think from Annie might be the coolest interactive resource I've seen, the best interactive map. And I would have students go find your district, figure out when it has changed hands. What did those elections look like? How have the lines changed over time, right? I live in the 2nd Congressional District of Wisconsin in Madison. It is one of the bluest districts in the country, but it hasn't always been, right? So have your students figure out, why does my district look the way it does? Why do we end up with the representative that we do? And really the goal of the gerrymandering activity here is to figure out, what are some of the things that go in with gerrymandering? How does race and gerrymandering, how do they intersect with either racial gerrymandering or majority minority districts? And then after watching the film, have your students justify and prioritize how they think maps should be drawn. Which criteria are most important and why? I think here you could get into some really rich discussions about how we draw our districts, why we draw our districts the way we do, and have really deep and rich discussions about it as sort of a culminating activity. All right, so that's what I have. I think now I'm going to turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you. We'll be looking at all of these materials in a slightly different fashion. So I'm really delighted to be part of this review, and I thank the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at the University of Colorado Springs for hosting GeoCivics. So, think about this as multiple entry points for you and your students to explore these important topics. And remember that it's really essential to focus on the states, because elections in the United States are decentralized and they are run at the state and the local levels. So I recommend again that you explore state-based resources available on links from GeoCivics and other websites. The American Association of Geographers this past fall hosted 14 different panels focused on various states. And you might think about whether you also want to compare how your state functions in relationship to its neighbors and to the United States as a whole. So since the 2011 redistricting cycle, there have been multiple state and national coalitions formed to support fair districting. Some of these are familiar, such as the League of Women Voters. But in addition, there are these numerous online platforms that have been developed by universities and volunteers that David just mentioned, to assist non-experts in sharing their visions of what fair districts might look like. So I want to we've been looking at these online maps, but I want to remind you that geospatial technology is really key to drawing and analyzing redistricting maps, as well as to sharing information about your communities. And I would like to encourage you to become familiar with these important spatial research and analysis instruments, which prepare students for a variety of situations, not just civics class. And many of these were developed for community members, but there's no reason that they could not be used throughout the next decade as teaching tools. And the more people who are using them, the more likely we're going to be able to have Dave's Redistricting, Districtor, and District Builder available for educators. And as we return to less confined classrooms, we want to have some active approaches to engage these students who have been too much on Zoom. We hope today's review will kind of help you think about how you guide students in understanding the purposes of the decennial census and the components of electoral redistricting. So as a geographer, I'm often asked, what role geography plays in redistricting. The outcome of the redistricting effort is, of course, maps. But what role do patterns and location, movement and hierarchy, and other geographic concepts play in creating and analyzing electoral district maps? By starting to describe and draw their communities, students begin to see these geographic ideas in action. So just remember that redistricting happens at all scales for multiple legislative bodies, from city council and school board to state legislatures and the United States House of Representatives. So now we're going to investigate a variety of websites. As previously mentioned, everything is free and online, although many of these are hands-on activities. Okay, so the question I want to ask is, should we really have to spend so much time on redistricting? Other countries take less political approaches to the process. Although the rural-urban divide that we see in the United States exists across the world, Japan's recent election demonstrated that rural areas hold an outsized influence on its national government. Other groups advocate for different systems, such as ranked choice or approval voting, and several states use independent redistricting commissions, including Colorado. Does this eliminate politics from the discussion? Definitely not. But our experience shows that people feel they could be heard, and that there is this sense, both from people who participated on the redistricting commissions and those looking at it from afar, that this process was fair. So still, I would advocate for more people to make more maps to strengthen the final outcome. So, but just think of all those dedicated volunteers, many of whom are in the states where you live, and how they could be spending their time differently, making the world better. Okay, so now I'm going to move to hopefully sharing my screen, David.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we are stuck for the moment with making sure that everyone understands how this process works, especially your students, especially even in 2026, right? It doesn't matter that you've got seniors who are going to come through, they still have to learn all this. So let's look at a sample of the resources available on the GeoCivics website. Oops, sorry. So this TED Talk provides an overview of how educators and community members can be engaged in the redistricting process. Michigan created an organization called Voters Not Politicians to call attention to who should be drawing the maps, definitely not the people who are running in or managing the elections. So this is titled Redistricting of the People, by the People, and for the People. It's about 15 minutes and just gives you a quick overview of some of these resources. So again, the state is really important. So GeoCivics has a spot here for every state because this is the foundation for understanding redistricting. And we really have to have a sense of who is living where. And so each state has an on the move lesson, which can either be used with National Geographic's giant maps or with Legos and paper maps. And those, just as a reminder, are often free from your local tourist office. So here we see some students in Illinois, definitely pre-pandemic. This lesson asks students to examine population of the 15 largest cities over 3 time periods, ending with the 2020 census. So each state's pattern is different. You might see movement from the coast to the interior, from rural to urban areas, or settlements that started dispersed and stayed dispersed. So that's a great interactive lesson that looks at population change. And while you're discussing population, consider using the Counting for Pennies lesson, which provides an approach to exploring what happens to funding for your community if there's not a complete count of all residents. This is a great opportunity to connect math and social studies. Often overlooked, although, thank you, David, for including the criteria in your discussion, are the criteria by which the map makers should be guided. I noticed in our redistricting commission, they really did not want to discuss prioritizing these criteria or how they actually interpret them. This is really the most difficult part of the conversation because it's hard to define competitiveness, communities of interest, compactness, but not clarifying those concepts early on allows for a great deal of negotiation when you're actually drawing the map, which has its pluses and minuses. So this is a link from the National Conference of State Legislatures, which has some really excellent resources. So again, each state has its own criteria. There are these two guidelines at the federal level in terms of one person, one vote, and then the Voting Rights Act. So this is another activity to enable you to guide your students in understanding and prioritizing redistricting criteria. You can download these flashcards from Draw the Lines PA, and even though these examples are from Pennsylvania, you can also use them for your state. And then we also have put this online so that you can do this as an example, which we had to do during the pandemic. And there's a Spanish translation as well. So now it's really kind of time to think about how to move the words, right, those criteria to the map. And I would suggest, rather than trying to create electoral districts initially, that you invite students to draw their own community. Representable.org is a website that guides you through describing and drawing your community. While it was developed to provide an opportunity to share communities of interests with their with people who are drawing the maps, it also is a great tool to help your classes share their concepts of communities. And you can set up an organization, which may or may not show up here, that you could ask each of your students then to go in and add their idea of what their map of their community, as well as the description. And you can see here that we have, this was from a political geography class that I taught in the spring of 2021. And so you can see around Colorado Springs, there are many communities, but also there's one kind of north here in Castle Rock, because I had students who were joining from that area. So again, this is an example of an online open source tool that you can use. So Dave's Redistricting, very popular, right? Finally, you begin to understand a great deal about your community by dividing your area into districts. And thanks to these open source geospatial technology tools, these can be incorporated to classrooms at no cost. And this is a really big deal. I want to re-emphasize how important it is to have these tools available to the public and to educators. And I've been in a number of schools, and most schools have not had any trouble accessing these through their online sites. So using actual census data and real places, these tools move beyond the redistricting game. I saw somebody mention the redistricting game. Sorry, it looks like I've reached out to Annenberg. They're not going to be supporting that. And again, if you're not familiar with geospatial technology, you might want to start with one of these state-based online redistricting exercises. So in all of the states, we have an online redistricting exercise that ends up, hopefully, there we go. It's really, it only divides states by counties. So it's a little bit, it's not as accurate, right? But it gets you started. So this is a kind of a good entry point for you to move forward. So this is using 2010 data. But again, it's more of an instructional tool than actually drawing your district, which you could do with Districtor. And it could be, right, that one of these tools that we are sharing is more appropriate for your state. Just do a little bit of exploring yourself. Again, these were developed as tools for community engagement, and the instructions are really comprehensive and do not assume that you are a geospatial technology expert. So that makes them well suited to, civics and government classes. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and go back. All right, David, you can bring that last bit up. Beyond creating your own maps, those of you in states where maps have already been proposed could analyze them using a variety of online tools. And I've linked to that in the presentation, such as Princeton Gerrymandering Project's Redistricting Report Card. And just remember, while the census and congressional and legislative redistricting happens at a point in time every 10 years, the impacts of the census and how district lines are drawn will impact every community in the country. Who was counted, who did not get counted, whether people were included in the census or not, they still have to be represented and served through community resources.
All right. Just a couple things I want to add to what Rebecca had to say. If you're in a heavily populated state, if you're joining us from California, Texas, Florida, that sort of thing, and you're like, oh man, the redistricting game was great because it was simple and it sort of built on each other, and I don't know if I could throw my students in to draw the state of Texas from scratch. Start easy. Start with New Hampshire, start with Montana, states that have 2 congressional districts, and see if they can, find those places where to carve it up. I think there is something really powerful that, Rebecca was getting at here, of using real data and real technology. It makes it engaging and impactful for students to know that the tools that they're using are very similar, and in some cases identical, to the tools that the people who are doing this to draw those lines that truly matter. And then the activity here that you're seeing on your screen now, that's not only hands-on, but in many cases feet-on, is the giant traveling map. Rebecca, do you want to tell folks what's their best bet for finding that giant map in their state?
It's kind of hit and miss at the moment, depending on your state's, what the state of your geographic alliance is in your area. But I have linked as best I can from each state on the GeoCivics website. If you go down to the bottom, you could possibly find someone who might know where a giant map is in your state. And I am more than happy to be the giant map evangelist and link you up with whomever I know might have one. These are really incredible teaching tools from National Geographic, and I find them useful from preschool to adult. I use them often in community organizing.
And every state got 2 of those maps, of those giant maps. So somewhere in your state, there are 2 of those. All right,
Wonderful.
So we, before we take questions, we just wanted to thank our partners in this evening. This whole webinar came about because Rebecca and David and I are all what are called champion partners of the Educating for American Democracy Roadmap Project. And so the EAD Roadmap was introduced last spring. It's part of an NEH grant that was started with iCivics and the Civics X Now Coalition. New American History, Retro Report, and GeoCivics are all partner organizations. They're doing terrific work trying to integrate history and geography and economics and civics, and showing how interdisciplinary all of our social sciences are. So the link to the Roadmap Project is also embedded in the slides. We want to thank them for kind of bringing us together tonight because they asked us specifically, could you create something on this topic? This is, something that we don't have anything currently in the library, and man, did we have a good time doing it, and we hope you did too. And Rebecca's going to tell you about our other partner.
So the National Council for Geographic Education is an organization over 100 years old. It produces a couple journals, one of which I edit. So if anybody is interested in writing up a lesson, I edit the Geography Teacher, which is really out there to support people who are in the classroom. There's a Journal of Geography, which also provides research on geography education. And you can kind of see here the list of activities that are available. They are not going to have an annual conference this year. They're going to kind of have a kickoff on the 4th of December, and then there will be webinars throughout the spring. So I encourage you to visit ncge.org and think about getting more information from them.
All right. And folks, before we head out tonight, we have a few minutes here for questions that we'd love to get from you. I'm going to leave this slide up for a moment here in case you need contact information from us. But I think the easiest way, we'd love for you to unmute yourself. If you want to use the hand raise function, that would be great. But we'd love to hear what questions you have, either out loud or in the chat.
Hi, I just want to first start off by saying thank you guys so much. This has been great. I am currently new to teaching U.S. government here, and I live in Saipan, CNMI, U.S. territory out in Micronesia. And one of the biggest problems that I have is bringing stuff on the local level to them, because we're teaching U.S. government and we're so like disconnected from the mainland. And I struggle with finding resources that will have maps for us for any U.S. territory. So do you know if any of them do? I know that I had gotten a response, but I don't know if those were responses to me, and I know that NCGE and some of the maps that they have there, but I haven't necessarily had any luck finding ones that are like even any U.S. territory would be good. I know Puerto Rico, but again, we're completely different oceans.
There are maps of continents. And so the North America map would have Puerto Rico on it. But those are big maps. They would go into GIM, but there are really a wide variety of resources. I would say check out the Arizona Geographic Alliance. They have some excellent resources available on their website, some great maps to download.
Okay, great, thanks.